Good morning. Welcome to Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. We're live. It's the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. That means a lot to get into with player props and daily fantasy as well. We've got a college football game coming up on Monday night, too. This is going to be a great weekend for all of you here at SportsGrid, and we are so happy to lead you off here this morning. I'm Craig Mish, along with George Kurtz here on the show. We've got some great matchups to preview, George. Very excited for the weekend, the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. It's usually a lot of people's favorite weekend of the year. I think potentially we have a Sunday Night Football on paper in the divisional round that shapes up as the single best game of the year. I've said on Newswire all week long, George, I think this is going to be the single highest rated playoff game in history, outside of course, Super Bowl, which is going to always beat that. But I think, at least on paper for me, 3 of the 4 matchups look great. I will get into that, and we'll talk about why, but certainly we're here to break it all down and also go over the latest in fantasy football and the NFL as well. Good morning.
Good morning, and this is my favorite football weekend of the year as well. Divisional matchups, the number 1 seeds, the guys who had the buys last week, they're playing this weekend, so theoretically, we do get the best football this weekend. It's not my favorite sports weekend of the year. That's really more in October, where you got the baseball playoffs. NFL is heating up, and the NHL has just started. But it should be a great weekend. Weather looks like it might play a part. Hey, Craig, I know you're down there in sunny Miami there. It's beautiful. It's going to snow up here tomorrow, okay? That's Philadelphia. No. So going to be a little snowy. It's going to be a little cold throughout the other games as well. Brr.
Yeah. Not the best weather here. You would not be jealous. Anybody who came on vacation to South Florida this weekend is dealing with rain. It's wet outside. Not the best weekend for weather, I would say. Maybe it's just a weekend that you stay inside. I don't mind it at all, by the way, this weekend. My wife's like, let's go to dinner tonight. I think I said yes. I don't know. We'll see. Hope I don't know how many get out of that.
You can't go out during divisional weekend.
I don't have. Sometimes it's like I have a bum leg.
Last night, buddy. Took the wife out
last night. I know. And it's the Commanders too, and I want to watch. Obviously I'm in on them. If you watch the show all season long, you know that. All right, so we're going to get into the games in a minute here, and some other stuff as well. But let's get off to a good start here with our headlines here. We'll start off with what I think we're going to be talking about a lot next week, by the way, which is the coaching carousel in the NFL. I'm actually surprised we only had one new named coach this week. I think we're going to get 3 or 4 next week. I do. I think that this week is going to be a big week for that. As Mike Vrabel was named the new head coach of the New England Patriots. Not a surprise at all. Former player, of course, George, for the Patriots for several years. Was really good with a Tennessee team that really wasn't all that good, just trying to find a way to play defense and run the ball with Derrick Henry. I thought he was a really good coach, and Tennessee just went in a different direction. Seems to me he probably could have landed 2, maybe even 3 head coaching gigs in the NFL. That's certainly possible. So that's one of the things that we're talking about here. I guess we can begin there. Not a huge surprise, I think. He does have a quarterback of the future. I think while he may not be like Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward coming out this year, I mean, the Patriots may look at May and say, hey, I wish we did have pick 1 to take that guy. I still think that they're going to be very happy with him. And now what Vrabel has to do is put his coaching staff together, kind of do things the way they did, dare I say, in Tennessee a little bit, shorten the games, not the sexiest, run the ball, play good defense. Most importantly, though, George, get Drake May some weapons, right? Like, get this guy a running back, get this guy a line, get this guy some offensive weapons. And I think if they do that, they can have success.
I think this is a good start. Right? I think Vrabel's a fantastic coach. I'm the Cowboy fan, would have loved him in Dallas. Of course, that didn't end up happening. But you said the most important thing here. It's a start. You've got Vrabel, you've got May. You don't have much else. All right, so now you need to really rebuild here. Running back, wide receiver, skill positions. You need it all over the place. It's going to be a long process, and you play in a rough division. Mainly because the Buffalo Bills aren't going anywhere. As long as Josh Allen's healthy and playing here, that's the team to beat. We'll see what Miami becomes with Tua there. The Jets are sort of a mess, too. We'll see what happens there at the quarterback position. So I think they can battle for second place almost immediately, at least maybe a year or 2. But the battle for the division is going to take a little bit here. But I love this signing of Vrabel. I think, as you said, with their 6 openings still, I think probably 4 to 5 of them would have loved to have Vrabel. He went back to New England. Good for him.
Yeah, we'll get more into what he's got and get into the open positions in coaching. But, George, that's the top story of the week in the NFL. The top story of the week this weekend in the NFL are the games. Of course, we got games coming up this afternoon, 4:30 Eastern, Kansas City Chiefs, of course, taking on the Houston Texans. It's like Saturday morning cartoons when we were little. It's Saturday afternoon Houston Texans football in the playoffs. That's what we got, 8.5-point favorites. tonight, it's the game that I am the most interested in of the four. Yes, the most interested in. Washington Commanders, Detroit Lions. George and I are going to battle on this one. We don't see it the same. And then Sunday, we have the Rams and Eagles. Rams, I think currently about a 6-point favorite. Eagles, a 6-point favorite. I've seen some 6.5. And then unequivocally, the biggest line move of the weekend in the NFL was the Buffalo Bills, George, opening up as a 1.5 favorites to 1.5 underdogs in the NFL. The Bills in a Sunday night divisional matchup, an underdog in Buffalo. I didn't see that switch coming, but it just tells you how much the public believes that the first time the Ravens played the Bills, they can do it again a second time.
And maybe they can, but that first time the Ravens played the Bills were a beat-up team. All right, so I think we need to remember that. They had a lot of injuries there. They will not have this time here. Listen, it's close either way, right? We're talking about a point here, a point there. Do I think the Bills should be favored? Yeah, I do. All right, it's at home. They've had a great season here. The weather's going to play a part here. Look at it now, 13 degrees and probably snow. Wind shouldn't play a part here. 13 degrees is cold, okay? There's a difference between 28 degrees and 13. It's a massive difference, not just 15 degrees. It feels 50 degrees colder. So I think it's going to be a problem for Baltimore, I do. That being said, both teams are sort of similar, right? Allen and Cook, Jackson and Henry. I guess whoever doesn't make the mistake goes on to that game. But I love it here. We've all made the joke all week, right? It's death, taxes, and Houston, Texas playoff football at 4:30 on Saturday. It just doesn't matter. You're playing the Super Bowl champions. You're playing Mahomes. You're playing at 4:30. If you're an X-Files fan, you remember the cigarette man back in the day. He said, made a joke about, he controlled everything. And he goes, and one episode he goes, the Buffalo Bills, they will never win a Super Bowl, not on my watch. This reminds you of the same thing. The Houston Texans are playing at 4:30 on Saturday, no matter what. It's just weird how it just doesn't matter. They don't get a prime time game. They don't get a Sunday game. You're playing at 4:30 on Saturday. It should be a good game though. I'm looking forward to it today. And like everybody else, I expect Kansas City to win the game and Houston to cover. It's what's happened all year long.
It could be. Yeah, the NFL the NFL did make an official announcement this week that next season. And even this season, if the Houston Texans get to the Super Bowl, they will be moving it to Saturday at 4:30 Eastern. The Super Bowl will be played. This is a true story. I just made that up. That's a good joke, and I just made that up on the show just now. Want to end this segment real quick with an ode to a broadcaster. Bob Uecker passed away, George, this week, as everybody knows, at the age of 90 years old. Mr. Baseball in movies like Major League and beer commercials and Mr. Belvedere, and was a broadcaster for approximately 50 years after he ended up retiring. He called his last game with the Milwaukee Brewers. Bob Nightingale, USA Today, did a really great article on him this week saying that a lot of the Brewers, they knew that this was going to be his last year. He was very quiet about his illness. Every once in a while, George, there's an icon in sports that passes away that I think it's fair to acknowledge, and I just wanted to do that here on the show today. Because in terms of legendary broadcasters, it's sad to say that they really, they don't exist all that much anymore. You lose Vin Scully, you lose, Bob Uecker. Definitely have to get it out here on the show today.
He was fantastic. All right. You mentioned I grew up with him Saturday afternoon baseball back when that was a huge thing on NBC. Him, Joe Garagiola, maybe Bob Costas, whatever it might be. Mr. Belvedere, never watched that show, but he was on that. And, of course, we all remember his portrayal as Harry Doyle on Major League, right? That was just fantastic. Plus the beer commercials you mentioned. Bob Uecker will be missed. He was a baseball icon.
Yeah, certainly so. All right, let's take a quick time out here on Fantasy Sports today. We dive back into fantasy football. We'll dive a little bit deeper into what the Patriots can do to get back on track and maybe throw out some predictions as to who gets hired in the coaching carousel this week. You're watching FST on a Saturday morning, divisional round time, folks. We'll be right back.
The defending champion Kansas City Chiefs aim for an unprecedented third straight Super Bowl, but the Texans are ready to end the dynasty. Then the Commanders, fresh off their first playoff win since 2006, take on the high-powered offense of the Detroit Lions. Start your game day with pro football today at 10 a.m. for pregame betting. Then, stay in the action with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Talk about it failing and always putting the square peg into the round hole. We're going to run it. We're going to try and play these lower scoring games. They didn't score over 17 points in the 5 straight losses.
There's a chance for the Ravens to exercise every single demon on their way to a Super Bowl. But it also means the path is very difficult and things are only getting started.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on Sports Grid. I'm Craig Mish along with George Kurtz. First game of the day coming your way, Kansas City and Houston, 4:30 Eastern. We're going to preview the AFC and NFC Championship on this show. Wow, next week. All right, so let's get into the coaching right now. Actually, a report this morning. How about this, George? I don't know if you just saw this, but Adam Schefter, ESPN, said the Bears, this literally just happened. It didn't just happen. He's reporting it. That the Bears called the Steelers to trade for Mike Tomlin. How about that one? And I guess he's got a no trade clause in his contract. I got to tell you, man, I think Tomlin may be done in Pittsburgh, man. This seems like a lot of buzz with him either out or leaving or going somewhere else. We'll see. We'll save this one for later on because I want you to read the story here before you comment. So let's go to New England and then we'll go back to that. But Vrabel, as we talked about, had some success in Tennessee. He had Derrick Henry, and he had prime Derrick Henry for about 5 years. And when you have that player, you can basically build around that and let the rest do the dance, as they say, on defense and offense. He never had a great quarterback. Ryan Tannehill, I guess, was the guy there. But I don't know if there is dysfunction in Tennessee. Seems like maybe a little bit, George. They fired their GM in the offseason. So I feel like Vrabel is getting a second chance, but maybe his first chance should have continued with the Titans, and the Patriots are going to take advantage of that situation.
Yeah, Titans made a mistake when he moved on from Vrabel. All right, I think there's very little doubt about that. Vrabel, he comes up as like the leader of men, right? That's what they keep saying. He's the leader of men. So that's you certainly need that. Maybe he's closer to an older time coach, Craig, what you and I grew up with than what we see nowadays. So I think it's a very good hire. I do. I think he'll be the right guy for New England, but Grant is going to have to be patient. I said, this is not something they're going to fix in this year. I don't care what they do in free agents. I know they have a ton of money. I think it's $110 million offhand. So they could do a lot of damage here. They didn't get the number 1 pick. That certainly would have helped. They would have lost that last game, and they could have traded down because they have Drake May here. But they got the number 4 overall pick. It's a good starting point here. You're going to get a top player. Maybe you end up with Travis Hunter. So good for New England. It's a good start, but it's going to take a couple of years here. I do think Drake May is a franchise quarterback. And when I say that, though, Craig, I don't mean Josh Allen, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, not that type of franchise quarterback, but a guy you can win with, but you need to build around. And that building around is going to take some time here. Even if they hit everything correctly, it takes 2 years. And I doubt they'll hit everything correctly, but I think it's a really, really good start.
Yeah, and 3 picks in the first 70 and 4 picks in the first 80. That's going to help the Patriots start. They just have to identify some weapons on offense or tight end. I mean, I mean, how great would that Penn State tight end look, Warren, with Drake May next year if they could pull that off? But they have the 4th pick, the 38th pick, the 69th pick, and then the 77th pick. And then from there, let's just be honest, it's a crapshoot, okay? Anything after 100, no one really knows. But those are all the picks that they have there. And George is right. They have to be patient. It's not just Drake May. They've gotten some decent performances on offense. We know that their line is not very good. He was running for his life most of the season. We know their running backs are not very good. They just we keep naming guys that sound good and have cool names like Ramondre Stevenson, but the dude never does anything. And so just because your name is Ramondre doesn't mean you're going to be any good. Like I've talked about, cool names doesn't do it. Give me Ray Davis. I'm very happy. All right, rest of the NFL coaching carousel. We just mentioned the Bears. So I guess that's a story, Georgia. We're going to have to keep an eye on this week as to whether or not Tomlin wants to be there or not, because he's got a no-trade clause, and this does potentially open up the door for now other teams to make these calls as if they didn't already. I know Adam Schefter's reporting this, but teams know whether or not somebody has an NFL trade clause. We are maybe the public just finding this out, but of course everybody else knows. Jaguars, Cowboys, your Cowboys, Raiders, Jets, and Saints. So we have 6 teams there that are looking for new head coaches. I think by the time we do the show next week, 1 or 2, we're going to scratch off the board. But there's certainly a lot of good situations to get into when you consider, I mean, the Jets are in New York. I mean, I know what they say about the owner and all that. I don't care. I mean, it's a great market, number 1 market in the country. Raiders, I know they keep firing their coaches, but also they're selling out every game in Las Vegas. It's a brand new, fresh start, new GM, all of that. Bears have the franchise quarterback. Unfortunately, George, I think that your Dallas Cowboys may be the worst situation of them all because you don't get to pull any strings.
The Jets are probably the worst situation, but the Cowboys are up there because no one wants to work with Jerry. All right, Jerry's what are you going to do? And Jerry's going to milk this, by the way. I agree. You will get 1 this week, maybe 2, but still, teams may have to wait to interview certain people. Until after next week's game and that bye week for Super Bowl. So that's going to hurt, especially if a team like Detroit wins. Well, then you can't interview Ben Johnson, or you think Washington's going to win, or then you can't interview Cliff Kingsbury. So they may have to wait here. But Jerry's going to milk this. He's going to milk this until a Super Bowl. Every little drop he can get out of this. So Dallas is not announcing anybody this week here. Sam, man behind the glass, was telling us that he thinks Jacksonville's the best opportunity. I would have to agree because, listen, whether or not you think Trevor Lawrence is great or not great, they play in the AFC South. All right, the easiest division. Right, I'm not knocking it. It just is. You're not worried about Pat Mahomes. You're not worried about Josh Allen. All right, you're not worried about Jalen Hurts. Or in this case, Jaden Daniels, right, in the NFC East here. So there's not much going on in the South here outside of the Houston Texans that to worry about here. So I think Jacksonville may be the best opportunity here. Plus, you have an owner that wants to win and is involved, but not overly involved. The problem with Jacksonville is going to be with GM, Trent Baalke. I don't see how a legitimate head coach who has other options is going to want to deal with Baalke.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think all of those situations definitely in play into the coming week. And to me, I mentioned the Raiders, George, as a really good spot. The other thing for of all those teams that we just showed you, yes, there definitely is some pressure in Chicago and Jacksonville, no question, to win right away. No pressure like the one in Dallas. You can't be the head coach of the Cowboys in year 1 and win 5 or 6 games because you're going to be a one-and-done coach in the National Football League in Dallas. But coming up next, it's time for us to dive into our Fantasy Football Season Awards. We're going to have a full award show coming up in a few weeks when we have that week in between the AFC and NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. But we're going to go over our Rookies of the Year, the MVP, and see if George and I agree on any of this stuff as we get closer to countdown to our kickoff at 4:30 Eastern. You're watching Fantasy Sports today here on SportsGrid. Craig and George here on the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. And we'll be right back after this break. Don't go away.
The defending champion Kansas City Chiefs aim for an unprecedented third straight Super Bowl, but the Texans are ready to end the dynasty. Then the Commanders, fresh off their first playoff win since 2006, take on the high-powered offense of the Detroit Lions. Start your game day with pro football today at 10 a.m. for pregame betting. Then stay in the action with in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Talk about it failing and always putting the square peg into the round hole. We're going to run it. We're going to try and play these lower scoring games. They didn't score over 17 points in the 5 straight losses.
There's a chance for the Ravens to exercise every single demon on their way to a Super Bowl. But it also means the path is very difficult and things are only getting started.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on SportsGrid. We're going to talk some fantasy football awards. We're going to have a full recap show for you, by the way, coming up in a couple of weeks. So make sure you stay on the grid for that. That'll be in between the AFC-NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. Of course, Pro Bowl week, we're not going to do a fantasy football Pro Bowl show. We've decided against that for the 1 millionth consecutive year. We'll continue that tradition, just like Houston playing on a Saturday. But we're going to go over some of the awards potentially for us. I did not look at these in advance to know who George picked and know who I pick, and George doesn't log in at all to read this stuff, so he has no idea who I picked at all either. So this is great. We're going in completely blind. Let's start off with the Rookie of the Year in fantasy football, and I'll start first, then we'll go to George. You may be surprised with my response. George's response, because I could see his, unfortunately, for just this one. George is probably the one you thought I would give, but no. My fantasy rookie of the year is a running back. It's Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He had over 1,100 yards, 392 receiving yards, 47 receptions, and 8 touchdowns. And also, let's keep this in mind. A lot of these numbers are through the last 13 games of the season. Like they pretty much went into the season with Rachaad White being the guy. And then you remember Sean Tucker even got some action. Irving took over from about October on. And I would guess, George, I mean, if we're, being straight about it here, I mean, is Bucky Irving a first-round pick in fantasy football next season? If he's not first, he's definitely second.
Agreed. I don't think he's the first, only because I think most of it's going to take wide receivers first round from now on. I think a lot of us are tired of the running backs, and the Christian McCaffreys who get hurt, and all these other busts. But everything else he said is true, and I might even say that he really didn't come on until close to Halloween, because we were not happy with Todd Bowles that he was taking so long to go away from Rachaad White. Right, he kept looking for excuses to keep getting Rachaad White the ball when Irving was obviously the better player here. So I have no issues with your pick here. In fact, you might even hear about Bucky Irving from me later on these awards here. But no problem with the pick. I did go with your guy, Jaden Daniels. You talk about a running quarterback who's going to be year one is already a quarterback one, and he's going to be talked about next year right behind the big four, right? The Hurtses of the world, the Jackson, Allen, Burrow. Daniel's going to be right in that year for that 5th overall guy. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm the first person to tell you, C.J. Stroud was that guy this year, and he bombed. Maybe in year 2, Daniels takes a step back, but Stroud doesn't run. Daniels runs, and they're going to get better weapons around him. So I went with Jaden Daniels, quarterback, hardest position, maybe the hardest position to learn in all of sports. I thought he had a fantastic year one. And once again, as a Cowboy fan, I'm not happy about this.
Yeah, so rumors Devontae Adams could be headed to Washington alongside McLaurin. Can you imagine that for Washington going next year? Don't forget, this new owner of Washington, this guy's got a lot of money. I mean, they used to say, oh, Daniel Snyder's got a lot of money too. He didn't know how to spend it. This guy is ready to win. And so next year, I'm very curious what Washington ends up doing, whatever the result is tonight. All right, my breakout player of the year in fantasy football was a player that was on the radar a lot last season, but I really think has carved out a starting role and will be a second-round pick without a doubt in fantasy football next season. That's Chuba Hubbard of the Carolina Panthers. He rushed for over 1,100 yards, didn't even play the last week of the season. 11 touchdowns, George, 11. And as Bryce Young gets better, I think that will help Hubbard.
Once again, I have no quibbles here either. He was fantastic. Got hurt late. You know, that could have annoyed some people here. I went with Jahmyr Gibbs because this guy will be a first-round pick next year.
Yes.
He's just been fantastic. I think Montgomery coming back hurts the Lions. Now he's going to get less touches, right? Montgomery's been great, but Gibbs is otherworldly. Man, this guy's dangerous every time he touches the ball. He's a threat to take it to the house every time they touch on the ball. He's been fantastic, and the fact that passing game is so good, you can't stack the box to try and stop him. Love Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a staggering amount of touchdowns. 20 touchdowns for Jahmyr Gibbs on the season. George is right. Where would you have Gibbs take next year? Would you say, I mean, Hubbard is not going to be top five. Is Gibbs, would you say, George, a top 5 pick, right? I think that's fair at this point. Like McCaffrey will not be the number 1 pick. It'll be a couple receivers. Will Gibbs be the top? Well, Barkley probably still top running back, but
Barkley might be one, but Gibbs is 2.
I think Gibbs is 2. I don't know. I don't say about Henry. I still think people, when you get to that stage of your career, there's always going to be that faction of people that don't want to have that guy in the last year of his career. I'm not saying next year will be for Henry, but I think there'll be a portion of people that'll say
that'll be a year too early than a year too late. That sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Give me the younger guy. All right. We'll continue our discussion here and comeback player of the year in fantasy. We'll do that next. So make sure you stay on the grid for that. Don't forget, our Pro Football Today show is coming up later. Very exciting day for us here at SportsGrid, and we'll be back with more in the divisional round discussion next.
The defending champion Kansas City Chiefs aim for an unprecedented 3rd straight Super Bowl. But the Texans are ready to end the dynasty. Then the Commanders, fresh off their first playoff win since 2006, take on the high-powered offense of the Detroit Lions. Start your game day with Pro Football Today at 10 a.m. for pregame betting. Then stay in the action with in-game live game day. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Talk about it failing and always putting the square peg into the round hole. We're going to run it. We're going to try and play these lower scoring games. They didn't score over 17 points in the 5 straight losses.
There's a chance for the Ravens to exercise every single demon on their way to a Super Bowl. But it also means the path is very difficult and things are only getting started.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
All right, welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today. We continue talking fantasy football awards here on the show. Craig Mish, George Kurtz, thanks for waking up with us this morning on this Saturday. Joe Pisapia, Matt Stryker, as always, will be with you Sunday morning ahead of the final two games of the divisional weekend. All right, our comeback player of the year. I say our because I think George and I may see the same here. I peaked a little bit. Sorry, guys. J.K. Dobbins is the comeback player of the year. It was just the best choice, George. I mean, you and I thought the same here on this one. He had 9 touchdowns, 905 yards, 153 receiving yards. He was the bona fide comeback player of the year halfway through the season, and then unfortunately got hurt. He was never the same. Let's just be honest. He wasn't. Hopefully, he can get back to being who he was in the beginning of the season next year. But, George, I'll be skeptical. I'm just being honest. I will probably be skeptical of this just because, unfortunately for him, and you don't want to ever say this about somebody to root for him, but he's just been severely injury-prone. But if you drafted him, you got a lot more than you could have asked for. The yards, maybe not as much, but 9 touchdowns. That's a pretty big number for a running back these days.
Yeah, listen, he's had a lot of injuries in his career. It was good to see him come back and have a good 2/3 of a season, 3/4. I mean, I know I had him in a couple of leagues. He was great for me, so glad to have him, especially as late as I got him. This award I thought was one of the toughest ones, Craig, because he was the standout guy. I mean, I know people, Sam Darnold, what did he come back from? Being on a bad team? I mean, Joe Burrow, okay, he came back from a thumb injury that cost him a couple of games last year. Really? That's the guys you want to vote for here? No, I need guys who have a little bigger injuries than that. So I think he was sort of for me, the easiest choice. I didn't think it was anybody else. So I took J.K. Dobbins, and I hope he can come back again. Although, like you, Craig, I kind of have my doubts.
Yeah, I would agree. And probably on my, not on my not draft list, but on my skeptical list. I guess that's fair. Okay, so I do have a no draft list for this guy. I'm sorry to say. And by the way, I know he had a big catch in the game against Philly, but George, even the first half of that game between the Rams and Eagles, I don't know what his contract situation is. I probably should have checked before the show, but Cooper Kupp, would you touch this guy next season, George? I mean, I know he got 100 targets, but this is not a high percentage of catches for targets. 67, 710 yards, and 6 touchdowns. There are folks who are going to look at this that didn't draft Cooper Kupp next season and go, maybe he'll better. I don't think so, man, George. I think, gosh, end of the line, is that extreme with him? Maybe, but his best seasons are behind him, George. Nakua is the guy there. I could see them easily replacing him with DeMarcus Robinson or even someone else. I'm not sure what went on with Kupp, but he did not catch the 75% of his 100 targets, and he had some zeros in fantasy, man. To me, he's a big flop.
Oh, he's definitely. I don't think he's the biggest flop, but he's a big flop. Yeah, I wonder, Craig. He's another guy who's been hurt a lot throughout his career. Has it just caught up to him? Yeah, is he not going to be that guy anymore? I think if you're an optimist, your best case scenario is that he's hurt now, and then he'll recover during the offseason and beat Cooper Kupp again. I think that's an optimistic viewpoint because I think it's a combination of both. I think if Father Time has caught up to him, I think the injuries are getting to him, but I think he'll be better next year. But I'll be very wary. He's a guy if I'm drafting, Craig took Kupp, good, let Craig have him. I don't have to worry about it. That's why, because he's a guy I don't want 3 Cooper Kupps on my team because you're going to eat it. You're going to eat it here. I chose Tyreek Hill. He was, Craig, he was the guy I was touting as the number 1 overall pick this year. And that didn't work well at all. Okay. No. Part of it was because Tua got hurt, no doubt. But even when Tua was healthy, the numbers weren't there, and Tua can't take 7-step drops anymore because they want to protect him from the concussions, and he wants out or he doesn't want out. This is a mess here. So I have Tyreek Hill as my flop here. I wish I could take that pick back.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think a lot of people could too. Sort of asked for a trade at the end of the year, then walked it back a little bit. So we'll see what ends up happening there. All right, fantasy waiver wire. Let's get into it. I went a little bit different maybe than most would here. And I did go back to the Dolphins. Imagine Jonnu Smith had a better year than Tyreek Hill. This is true. 88? What? Is that right? 88 receptions for Jonnu Smith? 884 yards and 8 touchdowns? There may be some folks that said, well, I took Jonnu Smith as my tight end 2 in the 14th round this year in fantasy. And if you did, here's my question. Did you have him after week 1? Did you have him after week 2? I don't think so, because he didn't come on until about week 4, week 5. And then outside of Brock Bowers, George, he was the best tight end in fantasy football. So to me, he was my waiver, not me personally, because I didn't believe it. I didn't take him. I didn't pick him up. But he was a big waiver wire win, a rare tight end overperforming.
That's a great pick, by the way. Jonnu Smith is a great pick for this guy. He was fantastic. He a guy who could be a league winner because he was hot during the playoffs. Man, he's catching touchdowns. He was great. He's going to be a problem next year. Way to draft him, by the way. Is he a top 10? Is he a top 8? You know, that sort of thing. Is he your next Laporta where you're great? I like your pick better than I like mine. Listen, I love Bucky Irving. I chose Bucky Irving because he wasn't the starting running back in week 1. Now, all these guys might have been drafted. You mentioned, someone might have had Jonnu Smith. I don't know any league where Jonnu Smith was drafted. All right, offhand here, but somebody might have taken him around 14. Irving probably was taken in most leagues as the backup. We take every running back with a pulse nowadays. At least I know I do. I said I had Dobbins in a couple of leagues because he had a pulse, and I was taking him. So, but I would have liked to talk about Irving more if you didn't already select him here, because I think he had a great year. I think he is guy. You said earlier, you think he might be a first, second round running back. That's what I agree. Probably more second round for me because I think a lot of wide receivers are going in leagues here. But Irving was fantastic, especially with Mike Evans, with Mayfield, Godwin if he's back. No one's worried about that rushing game. All right, everyone's worried about stopping Evans. So good for Bucky Irving for making his mark.
Yep, fair enough. All right, fantasy football MVPs. I think we both have really good choices here. I went with running back because I just still think that if you have a number 1 running back in fantasy football, I'm not saying to draft one at the top. I'm saying if it ends up being that you got the top guy, you probably went far. Saquon Barkley, 2,000 yards. I mean, that's a big number still in this day and age of fantasy. 2,000 rushing yards on the season. Only 33 receptions. Maybe that's the one thing that you look at a guy like Gibbs who had 20 touchdowns and a lot more receptions. You can make the case you'd rather have Gibbs. But Barkley was Mr. Consistent, 15 touchdowns on the season, and he reinvented his career. He was not somebody that I even considered taking this season, George, just because I didn't know what it would be. I mean, when a guy is not as good as he looked early on in his career and he's a running back, you don't know when they turn 28, 29, what they're going to be in the future. Clearly, Barkley's at the top of his game. And by the way, who stopped Barkley all season long? No one.
Well, the Eagles stopped Barkley, right? Well, they didn't play him week 18 to go for the record. They stopped Barkley. He would have got, listen, if they would have played him, those 2 Giant games killed him because remember, he took himself out in the 4th quarter of the first Giant game when he was rushing for like 9 million yards.
Right.
You played him against those games, he would have had the record here. No problem with the Barkley pick. Love the season he had here. I chose Jamar Chase mainly because I remember the reason I didn't take him in a league or 2. Remember the contract squabble that was going on right before the season started, right during draft time.
Right.
All right. So and he had to put up the points he did because I stayed away from him, Craig, for that reason. I'm like, what if he does hold out a week or 2 to try and make a statement here? All right, we'll take Jefferson or we'll take CD Lamb. So I stayed away from him. So Jamar Chase, fantastic. I have no problem with the Barkley selection. They're both great. I almost went off the board here, Craig, because depending on how your definition is, these guys did what I thought they were going to do. If Hubbard would have played week 17, I would have chosen Chuba Hubbard for this award. That's how good he was. But since he missed week 17, missed your finals, I couldn't quite put him in there.
Yeah, I mean, that's a staggering number of targets. 175 targets for Jamar Chase on a team that has T. Higgins. Like, I'm not saying T. Higgins is the best thing ever, but still, like 175 targets. And he got me to the fantasy football playoffs. Definitely the case, and was good in every single week, every single round as well. All right, we'll take a quick time out here on the show. We'll go over some divisional fantasy specials. We'll see and take a look at the odds and tell us, and George and I will talk about whether or not any of them are worth getting a little coin on. Be right back.
This Sunday, the Rams carry the weight of their city when they face the Eagles. Then it's a clash of MVP caliber quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. SportsGrid has you covered all day, starting at 8 a.m. with FST for daily fantasy lineups. Lock in your picks with Pro Football Today and stay dialed in with real-time betting on in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Talk about it failing and always putting the square peg into the round hole. We're going to run it. We're going to try and play these lower scoring games. They didn't score over 17 points in the 5 straight losses.
There's a chance for the Ravens to exercise every single demon on their way to a Super Bowl. But it also means the path is very difficult and things are only getting started.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If I were that team and I was the coach, I would have just said, you know what? I'm leaving your ass at home, and you can wait. Well, you can get your own damn plane and fly it to Philadelphia, and then I'll still sit your ass. Zion's got to get himself together on the court, both physically but mentally, by being engaged and being on time.
Only on SportsGrid.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Good morning. Welcome back to Fantasy Sports Today here on SportsGrid. Let's take a look at some divisional fantasy specials. We'll see if we can get George to throw some of his hard-earned dollars down on any of these. All right, let's start off here. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Jared Goff to combine for 6+ passing touchdowns at minus 120. George, let's dive into this one first. Think it through. Where are these from, Sam? DraftKings or all FanDuel? Sorry. Okay, all FanDuel here. FanDuel Sportsbook. So, George, this is basically, it's a good number here. 6+ passing. You got 3 quarterbacks. 2-2-2 is fair, right? Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, and Goff. Can one of these guys throw for 3? That's what we're looking for here, because I would say the odds of Jackson and Mahomes throwing 1 are very high. 2, based on the total in the Chiefs game, I'm not sure that this would happen. So you're kind of looking for Goff, George, right? Like Goff is probably the one that has to have 3 for this to go over. Is that fair?
I think that's the one you're hoping for, yeah, because that's the game we expect the most points to be scored, right? That's the over-under 55.5 last I checked. So that's the one we're expecting 5 touchdowns from Detroit, at least 4. So some people think Dan Cable's not going to take the foot off the gas, right? He'll score 60 points in the game if he has to, or if he wants to, that sort of thing. My problem with this is, for all we know, it's going to be a Gibbs and Montgomery rushing in with touchdowns game. Amon St. Brown does the Michael Irvin, keeps going out at the 1-yard line. All right, so that worries me a little bit. Mahomes, that Houston defense is good. All right, they're not. I think Kansas City can score 3 touchdowns, but Mahomes could run one in. It could be a little tricky there. All right, and then Lamar Jackson will get the brutally cold game tomorrow with 13 degrees. So I'm a little worried about this. That being said, I wouldn't take the under. So 6. They've got it right. The number's right, 6.
Right.
I think you need Goff to get the 3. I think you need Goff to get the 3 to get this, because I think either Jackson or Mahomes is only going to get 1.
Okay, so let's that's a good graphic that we have here with Sam. So we can now just sub out. So we're subbing out Lamar Jackson for Jaden Daniels. Subbing out Lamar Jackson in the second one for Jaden Daniels, and you can see the odds are a little bit more in your favor. I got to tell you, I like this a little more than I like. Yeah, I do. I like because I could see Derrick Henry just taking the air out of the ball throughout the game. So I would of those first two that we just showed. If you're doing something on FanDuel with these today, I like the second one more than the first.
I'm with you. Once again, I think most of us think it's going to be a high-scoring game, Washington, Detroit tomorrow. So that means Daniels, he can run him in, he can throw it in, and you can beat Detroit in their secondary. Running against them is difficult. You can beat them in their secondary, and we expect Washington to be trailing throughout the game. Or at least I expect it. I know Craig thinks they're going to win by 4 touchdowns. But I like that one much better than the first one, actually. Not even a little bit. I like it much better than the first one. I think Daniel's going to have a better game as far as touchdowns than Lamar Jackson. Jackson will do a lot of damage to the air. But I think both those teams tomorrow night in Buffalo, they both want to take the air out of the ball. All right, that's it. It's Allen and Cook versus Jackson and Henry running the ball for both. It'll be tough to throw that ball in 13-degree weather. That ball is a rock, literally a rock when it's that cold.
Agreed. All right. So the next one is plus money because we've subbed out Goff and we put in Josh Allen, who generally is not going to throw as many touchdown passes in a game than Goff because he's going to run. So it's plus 140 with Josh Allen. And as we take a look even at the next one, let's keep it up there. We got Mahomes, Goff, and Daniels to give a little boost at a 7+ touchdown market, plus 190. I actually think, as we'll talk about the last one here, I'm like getting way ahead of myself, but I don't love this one. I don't love the 7+ at plus 190. It has nothing to do with the odds. Like you could have told me that this one is plus 120. I still don't love this one.
No, because now you need that extra. I said Mahomes, I think at best does too. Goff and Daniels, I could see doing 3 each. I really could here. That wouldn't really shock me at all here, but plus 190, I'm probably not getting enough there. I think I need another plus 250. I might go for it here. But you're asking a lot. I said there's a lot of ifs here. This is not because Goff could just hand the ball to Gibbs and he gets to Montgomery gets a touchdown. He's back this week. Montgomery's scoring. All right. I said I don't hate this. I'm trying to talk myself into this, but that 7 is going to be rough here. I think it's Mahomes that's going to bust us.
Yeah. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts combined for 6+ passing touchdowns, plus 200. I like this one more than I like the one before. I don't know why they're devaluing Hurts so much here. Why? Because he hasn't been great the last couple of weeks? No problem with him.
He's been terrible. I mean, not just he's not just hasn't been good here. All right, we got AJ Brown reading Tolstoy on the sidelines there. So it's passing touchdowns. So the tush push ain't going to help us here. So I think that's the issue there. He just hasn't looked all that great here. And once again, the weather tomorrow in Philly is iffy. All right, I'm just looking at it now. Well, I'm getting 6 inches of snow, it looks like, which means Philly's getting pretty much the same here, and it might be coming down during the game. I don't know if it's going to come down heavy during the game. It's just flurries. It'll just be beautiful TV and won't affect the players here. But if it's coming down hard, it could be a problem here. And the way to beat the Rams, by the way, Barkley. I think Barkley's going to he crushed him with 255 yards the first time. He's getting the ball a lot tomorrow.
All right, we're going to run through these real quick. These are a little bit more difficult. Any 4 of Gibbs, Henry, Barkley, Kyron Williams, and Nakua to each score 1+ touchdown, plus 300. You could see here, same thing with Gibbs, Henry, Barkley, Williams, and then A.J. Brown at plus 300. Gibbs, Henry, Barkley, Cook, Kelsey, 1+ touchdown at 310. Then you have Gibbs, Henry, Barkley, Cook, and Nico Collins to each score 1+ at plus 340, and then Gibbs, Henry, Cook, Amon-Ra, St. Brown. I mean, I don't know, man. Like, George, respectfully to FanDuel, this feels like a parlay. This feels like a dart throw for all of these. You'd be guessing. I guess which one would you guess that you would want more? I'm trying to find my favorite. Maybe I would throw the one at plus 340 with Nico Collins because it does seem like he's always on.
Yeah, he might be the one guy that scores there. They're all very similar. You got a lot of the same guys in each one of them. One of them is going to hit, maybe 2. I think I would take the best money with Nico as well here. I would take Nico over AJ Brown. So yes, give me Nico here plus 340.
All right, fair enough. We're going to take a quick timeout. Coming up next, it's crystal ball time. George will tell us some of the things that could happen in the NFL coaching tree next.
This Sunday, the Rams carry the weight of their city when they face the Eagles. Then it's a clash of MVP caliber quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. SportsGrid has you covered all day, starting at 8 a.m. with FST for daily fantasy lineups. Lock in your picks with Pro Football Today and stay dialed in with real-time betting on in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Talk about it failing and always putting the square peg into the round hole. We're going to run it. We're going to try and play these lower scoring games. They didn't score over 17 points in the 5 straight losses.
There's a chance for the Ravens to exercise every single demon on their way to a Super Bowl. But it also means the path is very difficult and things are only getting started.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If I were that team and I was the coach, I would have just said, you know what? I'm leaving your ass at home, and you can wait. Well, you can get your own damn plane and fly it to Philadelphia, and then I'll still sit your ass. Zion's got to get himself together on the court, both physically, but mentally by being engaged and being on time.
Only on SportsGrid.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Just like that, hour number 1 is almost done. Wow, that was a quick hour. Craig, Mish, George Kurtz. We got Sam, our producer, ready to roll here for the next hour. We're going to go into the games, little daily fantasy action as well. But as we always do here on the show, at the end of the first hour of our program, we do bold predictions. But because there's nothing bold to do anymore, there's 4 games left, we look into the crystal ball, the Kurtz crystal ball, so to speak. George sort of has his bold predictions, but they're on the coaching side today. I like this. On the coaching side, he's got his crystal ball on who the next 4 coaches will be in the open spots in the National Football League. George, who is the next coach of the Cowboys? Let's begin there.
All right, as we talked about, there are 6 openings. Cowboys, of course, are the big opening here. A lot of noise earlier in this week that Deion Sanders could be the next guy. I don't see Deion going to the Cowboys, okay? You talk about Jerry Jones wants the spotlight, right? He likes those interviews after the game, and being, everybody runs to Jerry to see what he's got to say. He hires Deion. He ain't got that no more because Deion will say just as many wild things as Jerry will. So I don't think Jerry hires Deion. I think this is all just to get publicity for the Cowboys. I think they'll milk this for a couple of weeks. The guy I mentioned earlier this week on Sports Rage with Gabe, that I think that'll be the next Dallas Cowboy head coach, has already coached for the Cowboys. All right, Debbie Kellen Moore, the current offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. If the Eagles happen to lose tomorrow, you might see these talks heat up this week. If they don't, well, you have to wait really another week or so. He was the offensive coordinator for the Cowboys. Mike McCarthy got rid of him. And I'm not making this up because McCarthy said, all Moore cares about is scoring points. I'm sorry, what? Isn't that his job, Mike? Now, what Mike was trying to say is that he doesn't run the ball enough to kill time, keep a defense off the field. Although the funny thing is, McCarthy throws the ball more than Moore did. The truth is, really, McCarthy didn't want Moore. He was sort of Moore was heaped on him by Jerry Jones, and McCarthy wanted to move on. Now they're both gone. I think Moore will be the quarterback of the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys when all is said and done. We'll move on to the New Orleans Saints here. It's a harder. Because who's going to be the quarterback here? And in some ways, I think it should be an offensive coach here. But without a quarterback, Derek Carr's coming back. It's not Rattler. They're terrible. All right. Maybe they could go with defensive side of the ball. I think this could be where the first of the Detroit assistant coaches go. That'd be Aaron Glenn, not Ben Johnson. I think Aaron Glenn could end up in New Orleans here. The defense is still good. Glenn can still work with that. It's not a bad spot to be, by the way. Yeah, it's tough when you don't have a quarterback. They're going to have to find one either in free agency. Maybe you draft one late age, like a Milroe or someone like that. But I think, once again, Aaron Glenn could end up there. Not a bad spot to be. NFC South, not the strongest, not the weakest of divisions either, but not the strongest of divisions. Tampa's a good team, not great. Atlanta, who knows what's going to happen there. And we know Carolina's still a work in progress. So I like Aaron Glenn to go to New Orleans here. Chicago Bears. I think this is where Mike McCarthy is going to end up. Now, Craig talked earlier in the show, right, that Mike Tomlin, apparently the Bears had contacted the Steelers to see if Mike Tomlin was available, and they were told he's not. All right, the Steelers are not trading him, and that he has a no-trade clause anyway. We also heard Tomlin say earlier this week, by the way, save your breath about trying to acquire me, so he may not be going anywhere anyway. But I think McCarthy's going to end up back in the NFC North. He did a decent job with the Cowboys. I don't think he's all that great. I think his offensive system is out of date here, but he is a decent coach, and the work with Caleb Williams wouldn't be the worst thing on the planet here. The crazy thing is we're hearing that second choice is Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll. I mean, I can't believe this guy he's AARP here. How can he be a second choice here? So McCarthy to the Bears here, just strange. And by the way, the next team, we're also hearing that Pete Carroll is second choice here. That if they don't get Ben Johnson, the Raiders will go up to Carroll too. What did Carroll do here to deserve this praise and love here? I think Ben Johnson could end up here. I don't feel great about this, but Tom Brady is pushing for Ben Johnson. And this might be tough for Ben Johnson to say no to. That being said, if I'm Ben Johnson, I do say no. I think if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm probably staying with Detroit another year. I don't think there's a great opportunity here for him. If he doesn't want to go to the Bears because he doesn't want to coach against the Lions, doesn't want to be in the NFC North, I think if I'm Ben, stay with Detroit for another year. You know you're going to have another great year. There'll be 6 openings next year again, and maybe you get a better opportunity.
What is Ben Johnson going to turn down half the league, George? Come on. Eventually, he's got to take a job. Come on, man.
I said the Raiders when you offered me.
No, I know, but I think he's got to take that job specifically. And also, in addition to that, one other name that you didn't mention, Joe Brady is going to be a head coach next year. Joe Brady. Watch. Bills coordinator. Coming up in hour number 2. I know you don't like it. It's funny. What did I hear a no? DFS, because a Bills fan. DFS divisional breakdown, Saturday and Sunday betting preview, and then we'll play a little buy or sell. That and a whole lot more as hour number 1 is in the books. Hour 2 is straight ahead, 9 to 10 a.m. Eastern, exclusively here on SportsGrid.
This Sunday, the Rams carry the weight of their city when they face the Eagles. Then it's a clash of MVP caliber quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. SportsGrid has you covered all day, starting at 8 a.m. with FST for daily fantasy lineups. Lock in your picks with Pro Football Today and stay dialed in with real-time betting on in-game live game day, only on SportsGrid.
Talk about it failing and always putting the square peg into the round hole. We're going to run it. We're going to try and play these lower scoring games. They didn't score over 17 points in the 5 straight losses.
There's a chance for the Ravens to exercise every single demon on their way to a Super Bowl. But it also means the path is very difficult and things are only getting started.
Pro Football Today, only on SportsGrid.
If I were that team and I was the coach, I would have just said, you know what? I'm leaving your ass at home, and you can wait. Well, you can get your own damn plane and fly it to Philadelphia, and then I'll still sit your ass. Zion's got to get himself together on the court, both physically but mentally, by being engaged and being on time.
Only on SportsGrid.
Statement from Giants president John Mara. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll will continue in their respective roles with the organization. As disappointing as the results of the season have been, Steve Tisch and I remain confident in the process that Joe and Brian have implemented.
The Giants, an absolute train wreck, and I love it.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.